Awesome. Hey, everybody. So, as Mr. Level said, I'm gonna go ahead and get started with the fundamentals for the week and just kind of give you guys a brief overview of what's going on, how it's going to impact the markets going forward. Um, a lot of things that we have going on actually going to affect our trades, but it's going to affect our lives. For not only the short term but the long term going forward. So, a couple of the things that happened today, we had Jerome Powell testifying. We had oil inventory numbers that came out. We had some flash and manufacturing numbers that came out, flash service and manufacturing numbers that came out for the U.S. today. So, um, if you guys were able to hear or see Trump speaking today, these are some of the things that him and Larry Kudlow, one of his economic advisors, spoke on. So essentially, they are looking at the economy at this point as being in recovery mode. Um, Congress is having a really hard time trying to justify an economic stimulus. Jerome Powell and Stephen Mnuchin are really pushing for another round of economic stimulus, something that's not quite as big as the first package that we got, but something that will definitely help us to kind of get through the rest of the year and just kind of make sure that we don't backtrack. So um, all of that matters. In the short term, it matters in the long term because whatever economic policy that's set forth now is definitely going to impact us in the years to come. Oil inventory numbers. So while this doesn't seem, while the oil numbers we've been looking at don't seem to be like that big of a deal, whenever we look at the policies and whenever we look at these oil companies and some of the things that they're deciding on right now, they're going to affect us in the long term because there are a lot of oil producers in the United States right now who are actually thinking about putting their output before debt, which means they'll go into as much debt as needed right now just to make sure that they can continue to put out oil. But recently, actually in the last week, California put out a bill stating that um, they were wanting to get rid of gasoline powered vehicles or the sale of gasoline powered vehicles in California by the year 2035. So that's in about 15 years. Um, so the oil markets are hearing this, oil producers are hearing this. California actually has a pretty steady oil um, producing economy of its own. So whenever we kind of put all of this together, this is really going to be something that sticks with us for a while. It could be that this is something that spreads to other states. California tends to be very, very liberal, very, 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 very liberal. So you have to find another state that's just as liberal as California. I can't think of too many, but to think about the economic impact of what it would mean to not sell gasoline vehicles, you have to think about the impact of how that's going to affect the lives of the citizens. Does that mean that now they're going to have to buy more expensive hybrids, Teslas? And it very well could mean that um, you get more of a write-off for buying these vehicles. There's currently a write-off now that the IRS provides, but it could mean that this increases um, if there's a big enough shift in the population to buy these vehicles. So with oil, there's a lot of things kind of happening right now down the pipeline. And then, of course, 15 years doesn't seem like is 15 years seems like it's far away, but it's really not. Especially when you're talking about oil and policy about buying vehicles, emissions policies, those things tend to last and spread out across years. So definitely keep that in mind. Tomorrow, as I told you guys, Monday, we have quite a bit of news tomorrow. Um, Swiss franc news, we have unemployment claims, we have a speech from the Bank of England. Jerome Powell and Stephen Mnuchin are both going to be testifying tomorrow. So tomorrow is going to be another day where the markets are going to be moving based off of testimony. And then Friday, we have core durable goods and durable good orders that are going to be coming out. Several other things that have happened this week that will carry over not only to next week, but for the rest of the year. And then for some of these things, who knows how long it will carry forward. Um, want you guys to keep in mind that Dr. Fauci spoke today, and um, there was a lot of talk about virus vaccines. So Johnson and Johnson is putting forth their vaccine, um, pushing it through for more testing, more trials to go forth so that they can actually produce their doses. Um, there was a verdict in the case of Breonna Taylor today. So presidential election years, just kind of going back to one of the previous Zoom calls we had, presidential election years tend to increase gun sales and tend to increase metals sales or exchanges between countries, solely because it's an election year. You don't know who's going to be the next president, and then depending on who the next president is, gun laws could become more strict, more lenient. So people tend to stock up and get things while they can. Civil unrest just tends to boost that even more so. So just keep that in mind. President Trump plans to announce the nominee for the seat on the Supreme Court on Saturday. So he's not currently really just answering a lot of questions in a lot of detail and being specific about who it's going to be, but he is making it known that he's going to announce it. He said that he had a lineup of like 5 women that he was going to choose. He definitely knew that it was going to be a woman. Currently, the front runner, if you missed it from before, is a Roman Catholic conservative. So that brings up Roe v. Wade. That brings up pro-life, pro-choice. She is in her previous talks. She hasn't actually had a case as a judge, but just in conversation and in things that she's had her say, she's been very pro-life. So that brings in Roe v. Wade. That brings in a lot of those elements that were imparted into the um, Obamacare Act that came from Roe v. Wade, and that also opens up there's several cases right now in Mississippi, Alabama, and some other states that have hearings on the efficacy of Roe v. Wade and the rights of women, and then also health care. So as soon as she's put in the seat, these are going to be cases that are going to be heard by the Supreme Court. These are cases that have been waiting to get talked about amongst those in the Supreme Court, and it just hasn't happened because of other cases that were ahead. So those are things to look out for, because that might not just be a short term, that might be a long term thing. And whether people believe it or not, a lot of these court cases that get used as evidence or get put forth to help bring forth other laws, they can get overturned. So keep that in mind. Trying to think, is there anything else? Right now, that's all I can think of, but I definitely want to go ahead and scroll forward to next week and just kind of show you guys what's on the calendar for next week. As you can see, not a whole lot, but next week is NFP. So we literally have not had a break since our last NFP. So I feel like we've had major news come out every week since. So now we're literally rolling from a week where we get Jerome Powell speaking all week to NFP. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at the market. Markets tend to do certain things like consolidate, make major moves, and then consolidate again. Um, with all the speeches we've had a lot of major news come out this week. I'm not really anticipating just a whole lot of movement next week from the beginning of the week, I should say, solely because a lot of the news we've already heard. We've kind of gotten glimpses of it already. But the major news that is coming out next week is like, in addition to NFP, is the consumer confidence numbers. We get ISM manufacturing and service numbers next week. We get a final GDP number, home sales, oil. So it's still going to be some news, but it's NFP. So keep that in mind. Um, so that's all I have for you guys for the news. If you guys have any questions about anything, you can go ahead and drop those questions in the chat. I will answer them as I see them. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Level so he can get started with the technical.